Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of All Nighter Discussions. And I am joined by my good friend, President CM, otherwise known as Connor. Connor, how are you doing?
Hanging in there myself, Gabe. How you doing?
So this is totally coincidental, not planned. We are recording this on the day of the third anniversary of the first video we ever did together.
Very strange coincidence. When I saw that memory pop up yesterday, telling me that I recorded the video for your video, I was like completely blown away. I was like, this is such a weird thing to happen.
Yes. Do you want to share what that video was?
We were discussing Rob Zombie's Halloween films.
We were championing Rob Zombie's Halloween films.
We were very much so. In fact, the intro made that very clear, where you started saying you were going to bash them, and then I love that little intro. But we were. If they gave out awards for being behind some movies, I think we would get them for that video.
I'm just waiting for Rob to send me a check.
We deserve one at this point. We probably increased sales by like 1 or 2 movies. That's saying something nowadays.
I'm out there to defend movies I love. It's so funny. Like every time they come out with, I actually just talked about this on the last episode. Every time a new Halloween movie comes out, a lot of people like to say, this is the worst. This is the worst. Okay, guys, can we just give it a little bit and maybe hold off on the worst label just for anything? I doubt anything is really the worst of that thing it's ever been,
Yeah, and even when it is, it's like, does that really do anything to the ones that you enjoy? Like, did Rob Zombie really ruin your Halloween fandom? No, he came out with 2 movies that you're never going to watch again. And if you do, why would you? Because you didn't like it, So yeah. I don't watch Hellraiser Revelations every year, and it'd be dumb of me to do so.
Yeah. I mean, the only reason you should watch a bad movie is if you enjoy it because of how bad it is.
Exactly. Like The Room.
Like The Room, exactly. Perfect example. Now, we are not talking about a bad movie today. We're talking about a good movie, a very excellent movie. Connor, what movie are we talking about?
We will be talking about The Funhouse.
The Funhouse, directed by Tobe Hooper, released in 1981. Now, how far back do you go with this movie? What's your relationship with it?
So this is a bit of a weird one for me. I believe it was my maybe sophomore year of high school. I was homesick one day. Nobody was home, out on the couch, and I just went on demand, and it happened to be a movie you could watch for free. So I turned it on. I had no idea what it was. It had an intriguing cover. I thought, I'm afraid of clowns. There's a clown on the cover. Let's do this. And so I turned it on and haven't been the same since.
It's a life-changing experience watching this movie. With me, I had been a fan of Tobe Hooper. Obviously, I'm a huge admirer of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Big fan of Poltergeist. So, I watched this. I finally watched it after hearing so much about it, because I think it's considered one of his best movies. And I would have to agree. There's so much I would love to get into about this film and where it stands in his career, because I actually want to open with this question. Is Tobe Hooper underrated?
100%. Yeah. I think people talk about like the cultural impact of Texas Chainsaw Massacre a lot and how that affected horror movies from that point forward. But I don't think people talk enough about how great he was visually. Any movie he was making, whether he was matching the tone of the movie or whatever it may be, his visuals were always on point. He had some very memorable characters. He brought some of the best out of actors who would go on to do not so well in some other films. I 100% think he's underrated. Would you follow that same train of thought?
I'm actually I have some hot takes I could drop, but the most non-controversial way I can put it is I think he is one of the premier talents of his generation as far as the horror film community goes. I think without him, without the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the landscape of horror would just be different. In a very terrible way, it would be different. I think without Poltergeist, I think you wouldn't have movies like Insidious. Or what was the Ethan Hawke movie? Was that Sinister? There's a whole
Yeah, Sinister.
Yeah, Sinister. There's several subgenres that he really helped kickstart with what I think are still like the best definitive examples. So I will completely affirm that. That being said, obviously he fell off at some point. Many people do. I think even would you agree that John Carpenter fell off at some point?
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, it happens. Sometimes it's uglier. Like some cases are uglier than others, but it happens. And there is a whole thing where people don't think he really directed Poltergeist. I don't exactly know where that rumor starts. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, people just I think it's one of those things where when you hold a director to one genre for so long, like I don't think the general audience really knows about some of these other films he did. In fact, when I talk to people about the Funhouse, some people look at me like I'm crazy, like they've never heard of it. So like I think when you pigeonhole somebody to one genre and then they do something that's still kind of in the same genre, but it's not the same. Maybe it's completely different stylistically or Poltergeist. When you compare Poltergeist to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I mean, it's pretty much day and night. I think you can agree with that. I mean, they're very, very different.
Versatile. Yeah.
Yes, and
But that's
so
why,
when when they don't see you as a versatile performer, and then you do something that shows you're a versatile performer, it's the same thing as like Star Wars. They say that Empire Strikes Back was not directed by Irvin Kershner, which they
who do
say
people think directed that movie? George
George
Lucas?
Lucas.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he wishes. He wishes.
I feel the same way about the Poltergeist discussion. I
Mhm.
think it's ridiculous. Even if it was a one-hit wonder for anybody or whatever they think it is, I would rather them think that than that they didn't direct it, because you're not giving that director credit. Was it a little bit up to the production, the producing from Steven Spielberg? Maybe, but I think he's just a great director. Maybe.
I mean, saying that Steven Spielberg had creative input, I mean, it's obvious he was the producer. That's like saying George Lucas directed Raiders of the Lost Ark because he produced that movie, right? So I'm not even going to humor those rumors. I just want to take some time to celebrate somebody who I just feel like, people know Tobe Hooper, and I'm sure he has a fan base, but I just don't think he gets enough credit. And this is a channel to discuss cult movies, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre is just too big for that. So is Poltergeist, but he definitely has a true cult hit in the Funhouse. Now, this movie, I think, is in mid transition between Halloween, the original Halloween, and the new slasher kind of body count oriented wave that was going to follow. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'll even throw in that it was a little bit more inspired by the Universal monster movies than the other slasher films where that came before it and after it. I think it's a kind of a unique blend of what was, what is, and what would be.
Yeah, I mean, our main villain wears a Frankenstein monster mask. So, and I'm shocked because Universal is very stingy with the rights to those characters. So I don't know what the legal process was getting permission to do that, but I doubt it was easy.
It was a Universal film.
Yeah, but still, I just feel like I'm just still surprised that somebody there said, yeah, you can use our beloved mascot.
I was shocked to see it too.
Right. I mean, we're getting into the film already. There's a scene where this man has a, premature, something happens prematurely. It's undignified. We won't go into the details, but yeah, that they would let the Frankenstein monster be associated with that. Still, I doubt that would happen today. Universal logo or not.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Now, how would you describe the plot to this movie?
As far as like I guess kind of quality, or how would I like sum up the movie if I had to?
No, how would you summarize it to people who haven't seen it yet?
I usually just tell people it's a movie about some kids who decide to spend the night at a fun house at a carnival, a controversial carnival at that, one that has had some potentially dark, mysterious dealings in the past that people know about and the news talks about, but people still go because that's the nature of human beings. They go and spend the night at the Funhouse, and a night of absolute chaos ensues when they are discovered. That's usually what I give to people. Is like it follows like a similar formula to what people would watch now. So that's kind of how I sum it up.
Yeah.
How
The details are different though. The details
Yes.
are grotesque, but
Oh my God. Yeah.
that's why, I mean, if you haven't seen it already, definitely don't listen to this podcast. Go out and watch it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a really good summary because even though you could call this movie standard if you wanted to, I mean, there's being standard like generic, and there's being standard like using a template to build off of. And that's what this movie does. I mean, the first thing I think of with this movie is just the atmosphere. I think of the not only the visuals, but just the supporting characters, the other people inside this carnival. Like one of my favorite character actors, William Finley from Phantom of the Paradise, he has a part in this. I don't know if you've seen that film. Yeah,
so it's been a while, but
it's been a while. Yeah, but just like there are just so many memorable, distinct things about this movie. It really does feel like going to a carnival.
a dark one, but yes, you feel it when you watch it. I've never even been to one of the big carnivals, and I know the atmosphere nails it because everybody agrees with that. If they watch it, they say it felt like we were at a carnival, a dingy carnival, but a carnival.
Yeah. And I don't know if carnivals are still a relevant thing. How many kids go to carnivals? I have no idea. Especially after COVID, but it still captured this. It has this atmosphere of something mischievous, something that's enticing because of how forbidden it seems and it feels. And this carnival is not one you take kids to. Like it is like a freak show, basically. Now, the characters, how would you describe the characters in terms of are they good characters, or are they just useful to the plot?
I think it depends on who you're talking about. I think personally, I would say that there are good characters in this movie, but I think and I might catch a little bit of heat for saying this, but I feel like the best characters in the movie are not necessarily the ones that we're supposed to like. It's very similar to something that Rob Zombie does in his movies, where you start to kind of like the characters you're not supposed to like, but that's kind of what they're going for. And it gets you to a point where, okay, now I understand why I wasn't supposed to like this person.
I mean,
so,
I bet that this was a big influence on House of a Thousand Corpses.
I mean, 100%. I mean, this movie, I feel like when I watch this, I'm watching one of the seeds for House of a Thousand Corpses.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, of course, another Tobe Hooper classic in a lot of ways, and one that's like not quite cult status, a little bigger.
Classic
but it's also,
is the right word.
Exactly.
No,
yeah.
I I would love to talk about that movie. I have a lot of mixed thoughts, but I definitely lean on the side of I'm glad it exists. Like, some movies, they're not perfect, but you're just glad it's around. You're glad you get to watch it.
100%. That's that. I just have a blast watching it. That's all I do. I turn my brain off for a little bit, just have a good time.
And I know how some people can watch TCM2, then watch Poltergeist and say, no way the same guy directed that. But he was versatile. He truly was. I mean, before he did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he did a lot of really weird, kind of trippy student films that were kind of fabled around Austin, Texas.
Well, I mean, compare a lot of his films. I mean, when you go through his filmography, just looking at the covers, you don't have to watch the movies. If you look at the covers of these movies, you can tell how different they are from each other. There's a movie that's escaping me, the name, but it's like he did like a space horror movie, and it was like completely different than some of the, yes.
Yeah.
And it still had some of like Tobe Hooperisms, but it was very different. And I think the Funhouse is a good example of that. I mean, while some of this movie is, I actually was talking to somebody and they made a really good comparison to bring up Rob Zombie again. They told me that this was sort of like his Lords of Salem film, where it still has that crazy, it still has that over the top, but it's very much focused on some good visuals. It's a little bit more subdued for a lot of the movie.
That's an interesting.
It's an interesting comparison.
Yeah. I mean, Lords of Salem is just so abstract and it's really not mainstream.
Not
like this this movie is, it's playing to trends that had been proven by that
Oh
point.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it could have been mainstream. I don't know why it wasn't.
I think some of the, he really likes these like gritty, off-putting details in his movies. And I just think that it was probably too much for some people. Like Halloween, you never want to look away from the screen in Halloween. I'm talking the original, of course. It's a very watchable movie, even though it's trying to scare you.
Yeah,
And that goes
nothing
for a
makes you
lot.
like nothing makes you feel gross when you watch
Sure.
it.
Yeah, exactly. So with this movie, I think a lot of people were probably just off put, and some people have the idea that horror movies, they're not really meant to be scary. They're fun rides, just like a carnival. But some carnivals are fucked up, just like the one in this movie.
Like this one, exactly.
Yeah. Now the lead actress, the final girl here, she went on to be an Amadeus. Did you know that?
I did not. I haven't done a whole lot of research on her.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't either, but I saw Amadeus sometime in the last year, and I was like, this woman, she's like a main character. She looks familiar, I thought. So I look her up and like, she was in the Funhouse like a year earlier. Okay,
I didn't realize they were that close either. That's crazy.
good for her. That's and I'm surprised that she didn't do more because she is really good in both movies.
Yeah, I think she's very good in this movie.
Yeah,
Even the subtle things are very good.
exactly. Now, I will say, as far as like disturbing content goes, I think her relationship with her brother is something that genuinely rubbed me the wrong way.
Oh my God. It's still like just saying it. Like, I don't like it.
Yeah, if you've seen the movie, you know exactly what we're talking about. And there's like a sexual aspect to this movie, like some kind of weird, kinky, very Stephen King-ish aspect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about it that way, but yeah, it's because it's kind of subdued in some places where like you kind of think like, oh, are they doing something there? But then you're like, oh yeah, like this is a little this is a little much. That first scene was a little much.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't know why Tobe Hooper was so committed to this, but he clearly was. I can just imagine him telling Universal Studios, like, no, he has to, yeah, we have to have premature ejaculation in this
Could
movie.
you imagine if he was fighting for that? Like they're like, hey, I don't know about this. And he's like, listen, it's important. Okay.
I mean, he must have. Otherwise, why would they? Again, Universal Studios, they don't just let this slip into their movies.
I wonder if this is why. Could you I don't remember a whole lot of instances before then that they were used, but let's think about this. Like when you're watching this movie, this is pre Monster Squad, which had all those monsters in it.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the same way, but similar. But nobody had heard of any of these characters since then. So Universal made a good choice by picking a movie to say like, let's throw these Universal monsters in here, not as like characters, but enough to be like, oh yeah, Frankenstein. Oh yeah, Dracula. Oh yeah, all of this stuff. I think they did it just enough because like even it's pretty obvious that they went a little bit heavy on the Universal monsters. They're in the movie. Not only are there posters for, I believe it's Frankenstein and Wolfman on the posters.
Yeah, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman.
And then they have a character that dresses like Dracula, and they have a character that dresses like Frankenstein. And so like they have plenty in this movie that reminds you of Universal monsters, and it's smart for them to do. But I almost wonder if they put it in this movie to be like, hey guys, remember we're Universal monsters, and then they watched it and we're like, oh no, we need to not do this again.
Let me tell you what I think is very likely. So this is the same year that Universal Studios releases Halloween 2. So they're trying to cash in on the slasher craze. They don't know what makes these movies work. So maybe they looked at some of these kind of, let's say, quirks of Tobe Hooper's directing, and they said, well, if the kids like this stuff, okay, whatever. And then when this movie didn't do better, they were like, okay, that's probably what killed it. Let's steer away from the possible incest. Let's steer away from the sexual misconduct. I don't know, just a theory.
Definitely
did you know, Connor, that there is a novelization of this film?
No, I didn't.
It was actually, it might have sold better than the movie. It was by Dean Koontz.
Oh, Dean, really? I'm
Yeah,
actually very familiar with his. I'm not a reader, but I've definitely read a couple of Dean Koontz books. I actually own one still.
yeah, he's a famous name in horror. I'd say he's the second most famous next to Stephen King.
I would agree.
Yeah. So he wrote a novelization, and I didn't read the whole thing, but from what I could gather, it kind of took a more spiritual, kind of mystic approach. Like there was a lot more to the backstory of the carnival, and it was not a slasher kind of thing. It was, I almost want to call it R-rated Goosebumps. That's kind of how it felt. Yeah,
I
but
like that. That sounds awesome.
it was a good read from what I did read. This is not a knock on Deed Coots. I'm a really bad reader sometimes. But yeah, if you can find a copy, I'd suggest going out to read it. Again, I'm pretty sure it sold better than the actual movie. And I don't think a lot of people knew that the novelization was a novelization for this other movie that came out.
That's really funny you say that because now that you said that and it's by Dean Koontz, I feel like I can see the cover. I feel like I can see it in my head.
Yeah.
And I never even made the connect. I've seen this movie so many times and I've never, I've never even occurred to me. I'm gonna have to pick that up and read that if I decide
Give
that
it a
that's something
read.
I can do.
Give it a read. It's one of the few novelizations I'll ever recommend because it's pretty different. And it seems sustained on its own. Now I'm just kicking myself for not actually having finished the damn thing for this podcast.
No, don't worry. I'm actually collecting books right now for a specific topic that I won't talk about because it's definitely something that people can get heated over. But it's I love the stories. I know all of the stories. I just have not read the books themselves. I'm only
Hmm.
3 books in, and I have like over 50 of them. So I get it. I get it.
Now, when it comes to this being a slasher movie, would you say this is more kills oriented or not? Is it more like the original Halloween or like Friday the 13th?
I would say it's not as heavy on the kills. The kill, see, like my thing is like maybe it was just a little early on in the times, but this felt more like it was more of about the fears and the quote unquote creature feature type feel. The slasher aspect was there, I think, to drive everything home, but it didn't feel like it did not feel near as crazy as like movies would get. I mean, even the first Friday doesn't necessarily feel like that, but it doesn't have that same vibe. It doesn't have that same flow for me. I'm interested to see if you feel the same way in that it's not so heavy on
I
that part of the
agree.
movie.
I agree. First off, there's something to like, it's a subtle difference, but it matters. When you have a core group of characters that are getting killed off, that's one thing. But when you do the Friday thing where you just introduce characters in this one scene so they get killed off, um, that's another thing completely. And for me, this one is really about building suspense and tension. I mean, they're trapped in that location, and that's such a great idea. And what I hate about most slasher movies is that usually they don't, like, the characters don't know they're in danger until the last 15 minutes. I've always complained about that. Right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, because
100%.
it doesn't let the tension build. And that's something that goes for the original Halloween. And I kind of almost feel the same way about that movie, but we won't get into it. No. But yeah, this movie does it right. It feels more like Alien. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can definitely see it. I feel like it's very like um there's an aspect to it that's almost like the remakes of Halloween or almost like a Frankenstein type deal where you almost kind of feel bad for the killer in some ways. Like you don't, but you kind of do. Like there's that little
Yeah.
aspect there.
Well, I
So
mean,
like I think that changes it, especially with like you said, keeping it like contained in a single area. And by the way, totally with you. Like they feel like they're in danger for half of this movie, and
yeah,
you feel that before they even feel like they're in danger. Amy's her name in the movie, right? Main character.
yeah,
Yeah. Amy knows something's up as she's going through it. She's getting that feeling. So like I feel like she felt like she was in danger before everybody else did, but they feel like they're in danger so long and the kills are such a small part of them being endangered. That's why I feel like it's a little, I don't, it's a good change of pace in a slasher.
Yeah. And again, like, I mean, people act like slasher movies invented the idea of there being a killer murdering a group of people. Like, the slasher movies invented that concept. That goes back to Agatha Christie, or, it's just like, it's a simple idea. What slasher movies did is say, okay, what we're going to do is make it not about the kind of back and forth between, the cat and mouse game. It's just about seeing the kills, making that the centerpiece. And I like slasher movies by and large, but that's something I do resent about them. But this movie stays true to that very classic idea. Now, you brought up the Frankenstein monster, and the cool thing is that the Frankenstein monster is a very tragic character, right? And I feel like that's what they're saying about this killer, that he's very tragic.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And that's the vibe that I felt. I feel like some people are going to see it and, like my girlfriend, maybe think that some of it's a little silly or over the top, or, in some cases, maybe dated, if you want to call it that. I don't like to call it that because I can put myself into different perspectives when I watch movies. But the one thing that sticks with me every time I watch this is like, you feel like you can't help but feel a little bit bad for the character and wonder what his life would have been like if he would have been under different circumstances. Yeah, he still would have been this freak, but what he like, he's pushed very clearly to do
Oh
what
yeah.
he's doing. So it
Again,
makes you feel bad because it's like he doesn't want to, but he feels like he has to.
yeah, this came out a year after The Elephant Man, right? So it's almost like kind of like a what if on that. What if the Elephant Man had snapped and he didn't
Yeah,
turn out so
I
nice?
didn't
I
even.
don't know.
Yeah, that's a good.
Probably
That's a good take.
probably pulling that on my ass. It probably
No,
didn't.
I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
It's a good way to look at it.
Now, at the same time, like the Frankenstein monster, we think of him as being very tragic in a certain kind of literary way, but this feels very undignified. And that feels like a choice. It almost feels some kind of like weird deconstruction of that concept, like the tragic villain. Like, he just wanted a hand job. That's all he wanted.
Well, let's take that a bit of a different way. I mean, like, yes, that was definitely the driving force to what happened. But if you listen to like what he says a little bit after that, I mean, it seems like what it is a perversion of the idea of wanting to be loved despite your flaws. That's how I look at it. Is like, let's take this concept of like,
I
you want
agree.
to be loved despite what's wrong with you and despite the fact that you may be different, but it's taking that and then perverting it and making it into something that's like, and I think in a carnival setting, that's the best place to do it, honestly, in my opinion.
Yeah, and obviously I was being kind of tongue in cheek there, but I
I love
really
it though.
agree that no, it's because people are always going to try to figure out the line between love and lust, and I think this movie is like kind of it erases that line. It's like that line doesn't exist.
100%.
Not for this guy who doesn't know the difference, because he doesn't know what real human interaction is, because he was raised under the worst possible circumstances.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about this villain. The design is wicked.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the way this thing looks.
I totally agree. I think if a couple of things would have been tweaked around the look, and I'm sure that that's something that we're going to get into a little bit, but the look of this thing, like if I could get a mask of that today and put it up in my house, I would do it in a heartbeat. That thing is so cool looking.
Yeah, and it's really jarring too. Like, it's not the kind of movie monster you expect, because it genuinely looks nasty.
Yeah, it makes you feel gross. Like it's I feel like so many times there's like movie ugly and then there's ugly ugly. And when
Yeah.
movie ugly goes ugly ugly, it doesn't always turn out well. But this time it worked so well for me, especially with that little kind of small introduction we get to the idea of something looking like that earlier in the movie. For it to come full circle, it was like, I was like, yeah, I can't believe they
Yeah,
actually pulled that off.
because again, we're in an environment already at this fun house where it's just an ugly place, you could say. I mean, it's kind of degenerate, run down, sleazy. So I feel like you are prepared for how ugly this thing is going to look. But the thing is, too, it just doesn't seem to be human. Like, it just seems like, I think a reason I compare it to Alien is because he reminds me of an alien.
I think that's like something that's so perfect about this is like personally why it works so well for me when we actually see what this thing looks like for the first time is that this whole movie up until this point, like from the time that they got to the carnival until the time that this happens, there is something off. There is something that's not right about this. There's so many things that I could get into about it. In fact, like I took some notes while watching it because I was like, I just rewatched it the other day and I was like, I don't know what he's going to get into. So I'm not just going to like have these notes ready, but
No, if you got
there's
anything to say, man, say it.
well, like one of the things that I really liked about it is, and this character I feel like was the best in the entire movie, and it's the guy. I mean, he's credited as the Barker, but I believe is it Kevin Conroy, Kevin
Yeah.
Conway.
Yeah.
Um,
I think it's
he,
Conroy.
yeah, Conroy. Oh no, it does say Conway, Kevin Conway. I think Kevin Conroy is the Batman. Kevin Conway.
You're right.
That's why I didn't want to get it mixed up. I see it on the box though. I have the Scream Factory box with me.
That's hilarious.
And yeah, so it is Kevin Conway. But the fact that like he plays all three of the Barkers in the movie, but there's something like she has this moment with them. Amy has this moment with them where she just kind of like stares. She's almost like in a trance from them. And you're looking at them and you're like, okay, if you're not paying attention, they look familiar, but you don't understand why they look familiar. And that's done so well. There's the fact that you have to pay to get into this carnival, but there's so many homeless people and one guy who looks like he just went through a literal ringer. As they're walking through this thing, there's like the homeless lady in the bathroom with her. There's literally a part where when they first get there, where there's a guy like covering his bleeding face, and he's just walking around like he's in a daze.
Mm-hmm.
There's weird things about this movie, and every part of it makes you feel weird leading up to what happens. So it's almost like there's all this weird and there's something off, and then you get hit with it and you're like, whoa, this is really fucking cool.
Nothing feels safe.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think because as a kid or as a young person, I think we've gone to places we weren't supposed to, and we've just been stuck in that environment where we realize we've just kind of crossed a line into a world that we weren't ready for. That's the feeling, that's the essence this movie captures. I think that's what I was trying to say before, but like this carnival really represents this kind of like hellscape.
It does. And like even like the subtle details, like those characters that you see in the background, like sure that lady like gets a little bit more time to shine where she's talking about God is always watching. But I actually noticed something in this film that I didn't really notice before. I guess sometimes I just miss small details while I'm trying to analyze everything. But the scene where they are calling home to tell like, hey, I'm gonna spend the night at her, that old lady is behind them listening to them and watching them, and she's like right by the trash cans just listening to everything and paying close attention to them. And like it just makes you wonder, like, is this something bigger? Like, is there something different? There's just something off. Like you said, it's uncomfortable and you feel uncomfortable as you see everything. Nothing quite feels right. And so when you just reveal that creature and the awesome design it has, it's just I just love it every time. Like I said, there's things that could be different about it for sure, but the look and how it's introduced, I loved it.
Yeah, and I think this whole carnival, I don't think they're necessarily a conspiracy, but it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing of obviously like they run together. The last thing they want is an outsider coming in and like breaking things up for them. So
Exactly.
even little hints of that, like what you just pointed out, and I had never noticed. So it's really cool that you noticed that. But yeah, Tobe Hooper really likes this idea that these people can come together and create a kind of twisted family or some kind of community. That's something that runs through a lot of his films, and it's a creepy idea, right? Like, what brings these people together? Like, I just love thinking about the origin story to the carnival, or the origin story for the Sawyers. We've gotten some origin stories. I don't like any of them, so we won't get into that. But
Can't disagree with you.
did you hear there's a new Texas Chainsaw on the way?
I did. I am cautiously optimistic because I really liked the Texas Chainsaw movies as a whole, the older ones. So we'll see.
You know, I recently rewatched the two, like the remake and then the prequel. I think the remake really does hold up, but the
I agree.
prequel, how do you feel about that one?
Is you're talking about the one that came out right after the 2003 remake?
Yeah.
So I did not like it. I didn't like, if in the horror group that we used to belong to on Facebook, it was really like touted as like the dark horse of the franchise, that was like the best one, and like, you know, that's the one to watch if you're gonna watch one. But I don't feel the same way. I was unimpressed by it. I didn't think
Yeah.
it was all that great.
I think the people who champion it are gore hounds by and large.
I would probably agree with that.
Yeah. But I don't hate it. I've heard some people call it the worst. It's definitely not, but no. But I think the reason I fixate on it is because it tries to do something interesting that I've wanted to see the franchise do, but it just didn't, and it just got too distracted with the kills. And we're past the age where a movie like the Funhouse can exist, where it's not about the kills. It can really focus on building that atmosphere. And yeah, I don't know if we're ever going to see a big slasher movie like that again.
I think the closest that I can think, and I don't think it was done nearly as well, but I could see some similar vibes. I don't know if you've seen Hellfest, but it's like they were a little bit
I had not,
inspired.
yeah, I had not seen that yet. I mean, I bet they
But
were inspired.
yeah, it's not nearly, to me at least, it's not nearly on the same level. I think you will see some parallels with like visuals and stuff, but it tries, but it's not there.
I mean, the slasher movie is in such a weird place right now. Like, the Halloween sequels, super successful, but that's the only example I can think where this subgenre still has real life in it.
At least in the last like decade plus. I mean, I think before that it was just like Halloween 1 and 2 that Rob Zombie made, and then they brought back Freddy and Jason, but those went nowhere. So I mean, can you count, like, I wouldn't really count Trick or Treat. I don't think that counts.
No,
I,
that's not a slasher movie.
yeah,
Um,
and it wasn't very popular when it came out either, but
yeah. I guess
it's in a weird spot. I would agree.
yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of films like You're Next or The Collector, but those feel more subversive.
Yeah,
Tarantino once said something interesting. You know, he said he wanted to make a slasher movie, but then he realized that the structure of a slasher is so rigid that he would have no freedom to do anything else, because then it wouldn't be a slasher. And that really captured it. I think that is why you're not seeing it done anymore, is because filmmakers have kind of gotten tired of it, and they don't want to be confined by that structure.
I think a big thing too is that not only do they not want to be defined by that structure, directors who have gone away from that structure are, or at least deviated from it a little bit, maybe made their story a little bit more, or their film a little bit more story driven when it's a slasher movie. I think that's a big issue. But like, look at the horror movies that are popular right now. You're talking about movies like Get Out and The Witch, ones that are very story heavy.
Super
They're
cerebral.
more subdued. They're scary. They build up atmosphere. And while that is something that slashers have done, it's not something that they're always known for. So it's hard to find that balance when you make a slasher movie, that it's not all about the kills or it's not too story driven, because if it's one or the other, you're in trouble. It's just like tastes have changed, and it hasn't really changed in favor of slasher movies that much.
Which I think is mostly a good thing, because that means people are moving towards more high level concepts, more atmosphere. I think more character driven content. Yeah. But this is kind of a time capsule for me, because it represents this moment in time when slasher movies were I compare it to punk rock. You know, like, punk rock comes out, it feels very dangerous, it's very fresh, it's very new, but at the same time, it's only 3 chords. So it was a matter of time before, you know, people wanted to go out and try different forms of music.
No, I'm with you. I think it's the same thing with like, I think you can do that with every sort of age of horror films. Honestly, like even if it's in the same genre, like slasher films, like let's go if you go to the 90s, that's grunge music era. And when you
Mhm.
watch those movies, you feel that. You feel the grunge music era. I mean, watch Halloween 6. You feel the rock and roll grunge kind of mid 90s attitude, but then that died. And then you moved on to the Scream era of horror movies, and then that kind of died. And it's like, everything has a cycle. But when you see a movie like The Funhouse, you get kind of sad that it has a cycle because you just want people to appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the era of horror that has lasted the shortest is torture porn. I feel like that ended
And I'm
pretty
kind of glad. I gotta say, like I enjoy some of them for what they are. Don't get me wrong. I think I can watch all of the Saw movies that I've seen. Just up until the final chapter is where I kind of tap out. Like I
You
haven't
draw the
seen the
line.
one with Chris Rock, but I did not like Jigsaw. That being said, when I watch those I enjoy because there is a story that I can at least grip to. The Collector, I think, is another one that's kind of along the same lines ish. It's a little bit more on the slasher side. Um, but most of them, I'm so glad I died. I'm
Yeah,
sorry. I'm glad.
yeah, because it was also kind of infecting other subgenres. Like I think most
Oh,
of those,
100%.
yeah, most of those horror remakes fell into that trap. Even, guy I like, Rob Zombie. I mean, you could definitely accuse him of that.
I would accuse him of starting it. I mean, let's think about like when these movies started to get mass release. Before that, you're looking at movies like sort of like Cannibal Holocaust and things that came out like in the early days of when horror was actually getting really popular in the mainstream again after like your Universal Monsters era. And really those movies didn't start to get mass released until House of a Thousand Corpses came out. And while that's not a torture porn movie, it did push the parameters of what horror films were. Like look at the horror films, even like Michael Myers. Halloween 6 is very bloody and brutal, and even Halloween 5 in a way has a lot of brutal things about it. And then you watch Resurrection and even H20 to an extent, and they're not nearly that. They're much more subdued. And the next movie that really pushed that was House of a Thousand Corpses. I kind
Yeah,
of have to blame the guy.
I just I rewatched Halloween H2O last night, and I really forgot that it was not a PG-13 movie. I got that vibe the whole way through. And then there's one shot where an elevator shaft falls on this girl's leg, and you see it. It's pretty gory. And it's like, oh right. Yeah, this is for adults, technically.
It almost feels out of place when you watch a movie like that because it feels like
Yeah.
it's so. I think that's what I don't like about it so much is it's so clean,
Mhm.
which is not a problem that the Funhouse has, which is again refreshing when you go
I just
through
like
a movie like that. But
if the Funhouse were a gas station, it would have cigarette butts on the floor. It would have piss on the floor.
it'd be Captain Spaulding's.
Yeah, yeah. And Halloween H2O would be a Bucky's or something. It's just like this big commercial center where you can take your family.
That's absolutely. I didn't even think about that. That's absolutely what. Now I want to ask you this, as somebody who actually a few years ago didn't ever finish, but started writing my own remake of the Funhouse, reimagining, if you will. Do you think it's a movie that could be remade today and people would find enjoyment out of?
The question of can it be remade is always yes to me. Um, I'm not like a sacrilegious guy. I think other people deserve the chance to, you know, to go back and kind of
Retell a story.
refigure ideas. A lot of good can come of that. Now, I think it just depended on the approach. I mean, Hellfest, I didn't see it, but it definitely felt like at least a fun house for a new generation. So depending on how well that did, people could probably enjoy it. I think if you went with a studio, they would say, yeah, we're not doing any of this weird, perverted shit. But that's the stuff that really, to me, defines it and distinguishes it. So
I
I
would
don't think
agree.
you're ever going to recreate this fun house. I think you can take the basic premise and I think you can go in a lot of fun directions. You can probably do what the Texas Chainsaw remake did in 2003, something like that.
I would agree. I think it's like it would have to be done. Honestly, I think it would be more so jump scary than atmospheric, because that tends to be what's popular with movies that are more so like, I guess, kind of monster based. But I think it would still have some. I think if you put it in the hands of the right person, it would do well today. But I would agree with you that it can't be the same. I think in order to become bigger and better for today's audience, it has to stop being the authentic Funhouse, which kind of ruins the magic in some ways. At
Now, if
least
you go
for
eight,
something.
if A24 did it, then you can do whatever you want.
Yes, I trust them with almost anything at this point.
Yeah. I think they have a quota for bizarre sex scenes or whatever. I think,
or just something that makes you feel like pervy and gross,
yeah, super cringy.
Ugh,
Yeah.
It's still very good movies. I trust them with anything, but yeah.
I love all, that is not a knock. Okay. You can be weird in movies. It's
Oh,
allowed.
100%. I embrace weirdness in movies.
Yeah. So it's not an insult. I mean, you can say it in an insulting way, I guess, but just there's a place for weirdness, weird shit in movies. I love it. Now,
Agreed.
bouncing off of your question to me, I want to ask you, do you wish that this had become a franchise? Do you wish that this had spawned sequels, remakes, spin-offs, a Netflix series? I don't know.
So it's interesting that you ask that, because I was just thinking about it when I knew we were going to do this. And truthfully, in some ways, I would say no, but I thought of one thing. I thought it would be kind of interesting, not in like it would have to be done really well. But my thought is like, what if this exact thing is part of the draw of the carnival? Like, what if it just is like a scene that replays itself in different cities, And that's what, like, it's all a show sort of thing. So like just different people, they're still getting killed and stuff, but like that's the only way I really would have wanted to see a sequel to this, is if they went to some other town and somehow all these characters are back and another group of characters decides they're going to stay in there, and then they have different experiences, where it's almost like it's like a never ending cycle of idiot kids deciding they stay in the fun house and encountering this horrifying creature. And it's, I guess you could call it father. He probably wouldn't like that too much, but that's the only way I would have wanted to see a sequel. But I'm actually really glad this didn't spawn a sequel, because that's kind of the era where sequels got really terrible and they ignored a lot of the things that made the other movies great as a whole, and they only picked certain parts of it. And I really would have hated to see which parts they pick. Like watch any of the Friday or Nightmare sequels. Eventually they just said, okay, what's popular about it? People getting killed. So let's just make that the entire focus, and everything else doesn't matter, and we'll see how it goes. And it just didn't work after a while. So I'm kind of glad. What would you say that you wanted to see a sequel to the Funhouse, especially after how it ended?
So here's the interesting thing. People always say about the original Halloween, oh, they should have never made sequels. And it ended perfectly. They should never have made sequels. And then they watch every single sequel and they see every new one that comes out. So I don't believe that anybody really means it when they say they don't want sequels. I think that you're always willing to give it a shot for a new entry in a story that you've enjoyed. So I'm never going to dismiss the idea. But I think what likely would have happened is they would have become a more generic, more sanitized kind of version of what we see here. And just like with Halloween, I think the magic would have been lost, even more so because, without Tobe Hooper, without his eye for visuals, and without his willingness to go to these uncomfortable places, I mean, the Funhouse is not, I just don't know what is there other than something that every other slasher franchise could have done. So that's my basic answer.
I would agree with that. If they could have done something good, that would have been great. But I think it would have been. I don't know if it would have gone somewhere well.
It's just not realistic given the era.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the only slasher villain to me that really survived, in terms of like not having like just fallen into the terrible sequels trap, is Chucky. I actually really like pretty much all of the Chucky movies. That's rare.
I would say probably the same thing, not about Chucky though. I mean, I'm just never been a Chucky guy. Um, that's something that a lot of people bug me about, and I get that. But I would say probably like the only I think the character fell into terrible sequels, but I don't think it hurt the character, which was Freddy Krueger. I think every movie that's been made, that's been everybody's favorite part of it. Um, Whereas like everyone else turned into something that they didn't like. With Michael Myers, people didn't like that eventually, and with Friday the 13th, people didn't like that eventually. But every Freddy movie, Freddy was everybody's favorite part of it. So
I don't know, man. You've seen Freddy's Dead, right?
I have seen Freddy's Dead, but when people watch Freddy's Dead, they can at least get enjoyment out of Freddy's parts as opposed to everybody else's parts.
If other people can, that's great. I don't like anything about that movie.
If you had to pick one favorite thing, gun to the head, it's probably that fact that Freddy Krueger's in it.
I don't know. I mean, I think by that point the character had evolved so much into this cackling, witless.
It was a parody of itself.
It was a parody.
That's what I tell my girlfriend it is. When we were getting ready to watch, we watched Nightmare 2, and I was telling her about how much I love that. And I just said, once we get to Freddy's Dead, it's a literal parody of itself.
Yeah. I mean, I actually think I never felt like Jason humiliated himself. Like,
oh, I agree with that. I actually like most of the sequels. There's really only one that I won't watch. And like, they're not all great. It's, oh God, I'm gonna get crucified for this. Is Jason Takes Manhattan? I hate it. I don't like it.
Who's going to crucify you for that? That's like one of the
so
most
many people have. So like, that's the thing. Everybody's like, oh, why is it not Jason Goes to Hell? Well, because I actually got to have a good conversation with the director, who's my buddy. And I've talked to him quite a bit about the movie and about what the intentions were. And I get enjoyment out of it.
You're friends with Adam Marcus.
I am. He wishes me a happy birthday every year.
Okay, offline, off record, I have some follow-up questions. Okay, but yes, absolutely, I agree. And I've actually reviewed every single Friday movie. You can still see those videos on my channel. I pretty much defend everyone except Jason Takes Manhattan. With that one, I say this is the one sequel that is exactly as bad as people say it is.
So thank you, because I have said that for so long, and everybody's like, it's so fun. Like, it's not good, but it's fun. Why? And I'm like, it's not fun for me. Jason X is fun for me. It's not good, but it's fun for me. That's how I feel about it. But when I watch Jason Takes Manhattan, there's nothing in that movie that makes me say, oh yeah, I want to watch this again. There's one good kill that I enjoyed, and then everything else I didn't like. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, man. No. Jason Takes Manhattan. That's the first example of clickbait. He takes Manhattan.
He takes Toronto a little bit, but
he takes a boat ride to a city that vaguely looks like Manhattan in that it's a large city.
Yeah, but I guess we can take movies like that, and when we talk about something like the Funhouse, you can go into the realm of like, okay, maybe it would have been cool if there were sequels, but for it to be left alone, I don't think it would have. It may not have reached the status that it did. Maybe it would have been higher, maybe it would have been lower, who knows. But I like my Funhouse how it is at this moment. If you want to remake it, I'll watch it for sure. I'm all behind that. Like I said, I started writing one a couple of years ago. But some sequels, Freddy's Dead and Jason Takes Manhattan being examples of that, in some ways I'm very glad that it was one and done, and it was very well done.
Yeah, it remains pure. It's a pure thing that exists out there. It's a pure experience. It's exactly like a fun ride. You go in and you go out, and you don't go back to the fun ride like, oh, give me a new fun ride. It's the fun ride.
Exactly. Yeah. And if it doesn't change, you watch it again, you go through the same fun ride again, and you go, you know what? It's still as much of a blast as it was. That's how I feel about this. Every time I watch it, I say it's not getting any worse. It's not getting exponentially better. Sometimes I notice things that make me like it a little bit more, but I think anybody would do that with any ride. If I rode Haunted Mansion at Disney 400 times, I would probably see different things every single time that I rode it. But it's the same ride, and I don't know why somebody would ask for anything different. And could there have been some good different things? Sure, but
and you signed up for that ride. You knew it was the same ride when you bought the ticket.
Exactly. And there's some comfort in that, I think, especially with the enjoyment that at least I get out of this, and I know that you get out of this. It's comforting for me to turn on a movie, and maybe it's a little bit dirty and gringy and stuff, but you know what? It's still fun.
It's not the most safe fun ride. I
Yeah,
wouldn't
exactly.
on this one, but that adds to the experience.
It does. I would agree with you.
Okay. Well, I think we have found the perfect note to end on. Connor, I want to thank you for joining to talk about a really great movie that I suggest every horror fan, every slasher fan go out to see.
100%. I tell anybody who hasn't seen this movie, it's not going to be for everybody, but just please sit down. If you're going to watch it, whether it's on the Blu-ray or you're streaming it, just sit down, grab a good snack, grab a drink, preferably an alcoholic one. Just sit down, have a good time with it, and just enjoy the ride.
Yeah. Now, Connor, is there anywhere that you would like people to follow you, or is there any kind of projects that you would like to promote here?
So as I've been kind of shamelessly plugging this whole time, I am the co-owner and the social media director of Pro Wrestling Surge. If you are a wrestling fan at all, come follow us on Twitter, talk some wrestling opinions. The only thing that we don't tolerate is people who are intolerant of others. So if you come on, no matter what your contrarian opinions are from ours, we just like to have a good time. Like what you like, just don't be a bad person about it. And that's all that we do. So at PW Surge on Twitter, come and interact with us. We're going to be live tweeting at the time of recording this AEW Rampage tonight. We'll be live tweeting it. I know you won't hear this now, but every Friday we're doing that. So come and join us.
Yeah, well, I think you're safe, Connor, because I'm sure nobody on the internet is intolerant of other people or their opinions.
Oh, definitely not. We have not blocked anybody on our Twitter.
No worries there. All right. Well, thank you again. And I'm sure we will have another discussion, hopefully in less than 3 years. Again, weird coincidence.
Yeah, I loved our Starman discussion and I loved our Halloween discussion. So I cannot wait till the next time that we do this. It's been a blast this time to talk about a movie that I love. And literally anytime you want me on this thing, I will gladly be here. I have a blast talking about movies with you. So thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining. So guys, if you're listening out there, do that subscribe thing, do that like thing, and do that notification bell thing. Again, I can't keep track of all the ways that you can help promote this channel, but do everything you can. So this is Gabe from All Nighter Discussions, and we are signing out.